So there are a lot of ways that we can preserve and use our fruit. Of course, fresh eating is one of our favorites, but making homemade fruit vinegar is extremely easy, and it's an excellent thing to do if you have just a little bit of fruit and or you want to preserve it and it's super hot out and you do not want to heat up your kitchen. So we're going to make homemade fruit vinegar, which housewives and pioneers of old way back when have been doing for centuries. And it's much easier than a lot of people think. In fact, I think making homemade fruit vinegar may be one of the easiest things to make from scratch. Much easier than jam, jelly, canning, any of that kind of thing. So the only thing you need to have is either fresh fruit or fruit juice. But I'm going to show you how to easily, without using a steamer or heating up the kitchen or anything like that, make fruit juice so that you can make your fruit vinegar. So you have two options when you're going to make your fruit vinegar. One is you can purchase just straight fruit juice from the store, whatever flavor of fruit you would like. But if you have got some fruit, then it's really easy using this method. So we want to make sure that we have pierced it so that the juices from the fruit can actually infiltrate. You can see that's coming out already into our water. We're basically just going to be infusing this. So I'm just going to use my fork to stab that. And all we're going to do is fill this jar, about 2/3 of the way, which with these plums, because they're on the larger side, probably is only going to be, and I'm picking the really ripe ones here, these two. And just kind of get them in there. I think I can fit one more small one. Then we're just going to take cold water and we're going to fill that. And you can see the water is already changing color. You want to make sure that you leave a little bit of head space here because we are going to be fermenting this. So there is natural yeast on the fruit in the air, and that is going to be what first takes over and provides the first part of the fermentation. So we are going to be infusing this water, and you can do this twice to get a really strong fruit juice from this. So I'm going to cover this up. You want it to be breathable whenever you're doing your fermentation, especially in the first fermentation part. You want it to be breathable. So fabric works great. I don't usually recommend using cheesecloth because fruit flies get through cheesecloth. So fabric, tea towel. I have an espresso machine. We don't even use the coffee filters except in our camper when we're camping, but coffee filters work really, really well. So I always keep them on hand. Now you can use a rubber band or tie string, but our goal is, I just like to use the bands like this to tighten that down, that a fruit fly can't get up and underneath here and fly into here, because if they can, they will. So we're gonna leave this at room temperature for a couple of weeks, and then you are going to strain it out. So I did this with cherries. I had a small amount of cherries left over, and so I infused them, and then I didn't have any more cherries after the 2 weeks because cherry season was over and I had preserved all of my cherries in other forms. So I strained that out, and then I did a second infusion or fermentation so that it was a stronger flavor with blueberries. So these blueberries have been in here for just a couple of days, but you can see I've already got bubble action happening. Now with canning, bubbling is a very bad thing, but with fermentation, this is actually a sign that the yeast is in there and is active, and we are having our first fermentation. So we're gonna leave this for 2 weeks, having this on, and you don't wanna have it in direct sunlight. Like on the counter out of direct sunlight or even in a dark cupboard is great. Just don't forget about it. You'll want to check on it. And then we will strain out the solids and we will have left behind a lovely juice. But at that point, it's not vinegar yet. This first phase where we have mainly yeast and it's fermenting with the solids still in here is the alcohol phase. So it's going to smell like alcohol. But after 2 weeks, you want to make sure that you strain out the solids. And as I said, you can add more fruit in there if you're doing this and you're not starting with straight fruit juice first. and then do a second fermentation with either the same fruit or a different one for a mixed combination of flavors. But then you're going to take that juice, just the juice, and you're going to put that in a container. I like to use the mason jars again. I just have them on hand for everything. And then you're going to let it go for another anywhere from like 4 to 8 weeks before it becomes actual vinegar. However, make sure that you don't make this mistake. When I first started making vinegar at home, which was raw apple cider, apple scrap vinegar, after I strained out the solids for it to go into its second stage of fermentation, I was putting a seal tight lid on it, not realizing that that was drastically slowing down the conversion from the alcohol to the actual vinegar state. So we need the airborne bacteria, which is why we want to use breathable, even after we've strained out our solids and we have liquid, because that acetic acid is what we are after, and we need it to eat the alcohol, or transform the alcohol, I should say, into vinegar. And that happens with that airborne activity and the acetic acid. So make sure that after you've strained out your solids, you have a breathable lid like this, and it takes weeks, but the great thing is you're not really doing anything hands-on. And then you'll want to check it, and if it's starting to taste more vinegary than alcohol, let it go a little bit longer, and it's completely fine. It's shelf stable. There's nothing to worry about. Once you feel like it's reached full-on vinegar stage, then you can transfer it to another bottle. Glass is still best. Vinegar is, of course, acidic. But you can put either, I like to store it with these plastic lids on here. This still isn't 100% airtight, so I can have a small amount of evaporation. But this apple cider vinegar, which you can see the mother in there, which is almost looks like a SCOBY or floating, which is good with our raw. Don't be worried about that. That's actually a really good sign. I can have a small amount of evaporation because this isn't 100% airtight, but I'm really not worried about it. But you don't want to use metal because it will begin to erode the metal, and then you can have that dripping into your vinegar, which we want to make sure that we're avoiding. But if you want to put it in a glass bottle with like a cork, or that's more sealed up, you want to make sure that you do a test so that it doesn't explode. So one of the things that you'll want to do is when you think that it has reached full vinegar and is no longer alcohol, then you can put it into one of these like kombucha bottles that has this swing top that is nice and thick glass, but also allows you to completely seal it up. Decant it into one of these types of bottles, or a mason jar with a metal band and lid, just for this test only with the metal band and lid, and let it sit for 1 to 2 days. If it builds up pressure, meaning like when you go to release it, it goes, there's pressure, carbonation in there, then it's not 100% vinegar yet, and you need to put it back into a container with a breathable lid so that it doesn't build up too much pressure and actually explode, which if any of you have done kombucha before, can happen. And then let it sit for a couple more weeks and then do the test again. But if you have it in a container like this and no pressure is built up, there's no bubbles in 1 to 2 days, then it's completely fine to put in a glass bottle, put a cork in it, or something that is sealed up. You can store it in the fridge if you want to, but vinegar is completely shelf stable. So you can put it on the counter or in a cupboard away from direct light is ideal. And you have delicious flavored homemade fruit vinegar with fruit juice only. It's the only ingredient that you technically have to have. And you can really play around with the flavor. So this one I have here is going to be a plum vinegar. This is a cherry blueberry. This one, of course, is apple cider, but there are a ton of ways to use that vinegar in your cooking. You can use it to make homemade switchel, so you can check out my switchel or haymaker's punch recipe here. And I've got a blog post that has, I think it's like almost 30 different ways to use vinegar in the home, so make sure that you check that out as well.